Ever feel that sting at the supermarket checkout? You know, that feeling your bank account is taking a major hit every single time you buy groceries? Well, you are definitely not alone. The rising cost of food has become a huge source of stress for millions of Americans, and today we're going to break down exactly why. I mean, seriously, who hasn't had that moment? You get to the register, you see the total pop up, and you just kind of do a double take. That feeling of sticker shock, it's basically become a shared national experience. So let's get into it. And, this isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It has a very real human cost. Let's take Sheila Fields, a retired nurse from Texas. Her story really puts a face to the problem. She's spending her retirement hunting for deals, driving to multiple stores, and making really tough choices about what she just can't afford to buy anymore. And Sheila's story? Well, it's just one of millions. That sticker shock at the checkout has some incredibly serious consequences. In 2023, this number, right here, tells the national story. 13.5% of all U.S. households were what's called food insecure. That means millions of families weren't sure they have enough food or just flat out couldn't get it. So first, let's just stay with these stories from the checkout line for a moment and the very real human cost of these rising prices. All right, now let's zoom out and see how this personal pain builds into a massive national phenomenon. Which, of course, brings us to the big question. What is actually behind all this? What's driving these prices up? So it's not just one single thing. It's more like a perfect storm of three interconnected forces. You've got global politics, you've got pressures on our environment and our workforce, and then you have the massive economic shifts that are still echoing from the pandemic. Let's break them down one by one. First up, geopolitics. So import tariffs basically act like a direct tax on things we bring in from other countries. That raises the price on stuff like coffee or bananas. Then you add in global conflicts like the war in Ukraine, which cause huge disruptions to food supplies. And, well, those ripple effects eventually wash up right in our local supermarkets. Second, we're dealing with some intense environmental and labor pressures. Climate change is a massive factor here. It's literally shifting where we can reliably grow certain crops. And at the exact same time, right here in the US, labor shortages in agriculture mean it costs more to produce the food in the first place. And guess who that cost gets passed on to? Us. And third, there's the post-pandemic economy. We are still grappling with supply chain problems that started way back in 2020. Companies are facing higher costs, and they're passing them on, sometimes in sneaky ways. You've probably heard of shrinkflation. Yep, that's when you pay the same price, but the box or the bag gets just a little bit smaller. And the combined impact of all these forces is, well, it's staggering. Since February 2020, overall grocery prices have shot up by a whopping 29%. Think about that. That one number shows you the immense pressure that's been put on our budgets in just a few short years. But you know that 29% average actually hides some even more dramatic jumps for things we buy every day. I mean, look at this. In just the past year, orange juice is up almost 38%. Coffee, beef, even candy. They've all seen these huge hikes. This is where those big global forces hit your shopping cart hard. So we've seen why prices are up, but the next really important question is who feels this burden the most? Because the impact is far from equal. The reality is that for families already struggling, these high grocery prices aren't just an inconvenience. They collide with already high housing and healthcare costs, and that forces some truly impossible choices. And the data on this is incredibly stark. In 2023, the rates of food insecurity for Black and Hispanic households were more than double the rate for white, non-Hispanic households. That isn't a small difference. It's a massive systemic disparity. And other groups face significantly higher risks, too. Households with children, and especially families led by a single parent, are particularly vulnerable. And geographically, folks living in the South and in rural areas are also facing a greater struggle. Okay, so we've laid out the problem and its unequal impact. So now the question is, how are people coping, and what's the path forward from here? Well, the response is really happening on two different levels. On one hand, you have the individual strategies people are forced to use just to get by, using more coupons, switching to store brands, buying in bulk. But on the other hand, you have the much broader systemic solutions that experts say are necessary, like strengthening federal programs and tackling root causes like low wages. Now, on that individual level, one of the most powerful things we can do is just reduce waste. This number might shock you. A staggering 40% of all food in the United States gets thrown away. Just planning our meals a little better and actually using what we buy can make a real difference in our own budgets. And on that broader systemic level, it's so important to recognize the role of federal programs. Things like SNAP, which a lot of people know as food stamps, and WIC, they aren't just line items in a budget. They are a critical safety net that lifts millions of Americans, especially kids, out of poverty every single year. So, we'll end with this question. The high cost of groceries, it's about so much more than just our individual bank accounts. It's a reflection of global trade, our environment, and some really deep economic divides. So the real challenge is, how do we move beyond just coping day to day to actually build a stronger, more equitable food system where everyone can afford the basics?